Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story where money, power, and history totally collide. It's this fascinating look into the past that proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that nothing is ever as simple as it looks on the surface. We're going to examine the incredible, kind of mind-blowing story of the Spanish crown and how having literally more money than they knew what to do with actually led to their downfall. So, I want you to start by just imagining something for a second. Imagine discovering a literal mountain of silver. Suddenly, practically overnight, you've got the power to buy any army, fund the construction of any palace, and command any sea on the planet. You are, hands down, the richest entity on Earth. Now, most of us would probably call that the ultimate dream scenario, right? But for 16th century Spain, it was actually a death sentence.
Okay, let's dive into this, because here is the real jarring twist. Despite sitting on that absolute dream scenario of infinite wealth, 16th century Spain went bankrupt. And not just once, not twice, but 3 times in a span of just 40 years. 3 times. I mean, that sounds like a colossal failure of leadership, doesn't it? But, as you'll see in this explainer, it was actually a massive failure of arithmetic.
Section 1. The illusion of infinite wealth, sitting on a mountain of silver. So, back in the mid-1500s, Spain hit what they firmly believed was the ultimate jackpot. They gained access to a source of silver in the New World that was so incredibly vast, it basically transformed them into the world's treasury. But that picture of infinite wealth, total illusion. To truly understand how a global superpower goes totally bankrupt while literally sitting on a pile of treasure, we have to look past the shiny gold bars. We've got to look into the arithmetic of the balance sheet. Because, while those Spanish galleons were sailing back across the ocean heavy with treasure, the state itself was actually rotting from the inside out. Section 2. The arithmetic of leverage, financing the future. So, the crucial point here, the hidden mechanism most people completely miss, is how they actually managed all this money. See, Spain didn't just spend the incoming silver. Long before modern financial markets even existed, the crown practiced this historical version of leveraged growth. Basically, they would go out and borrow massive, totally unprecedented sums of money from Italian and German bankers at incredibly high interest rates. And the collateral they used to secure these loans? The future silver shipments. Shipments that hadn't even arrived yet. Now, sure, this strategy worked perfectly, but only as long as that silver kept flowing uninterrupted and the empire's wars stayed cheap. And this brilliantly illustrates how they got locked into a devastating 4-step vicious cycle. First, they promise those future silver shipments. Second, they borrow heavily from the Italian and German bankers. Third, they go out and fight expensive, multi-front wars. And war is never cheap. By the time King Philip II came around, Spain was fighting on so many fronts, stretching literally all the way from the Mediterranean to the Americas, which led directly to step 4. The silver coming in couldn't even cover the interest payments on the massive debt they had already racked up. There's a great quote for this. That's not cynicism, it's arithmetic. It's just a cold, hard mathematical truth. Think about it. When your incoming revenue from your absolute greatest asset cannot even cover the interest on the money you've borrowed against it, an impending financial collapse isn't just a possibility. It is an absolute mathematical certainty. Section 3. The cycle of sovereign defaults, the breaking point of the Spanish crown. Eventually, the whole system just inevitably buckled under its own enormous weight. It really didn't matter that Spain was the largest empire on Earth at the time. Gravity, in the form of debt, well, it always wins. By 1557, the Spanish crown declared the first of many sovereign defaults. The system simply broke. And then they did it again in 1575 and defaulted yet again in 1596. They were completely trapped in this relentless cycle, finding themselves in a position where they had to constantly conquer more land and find new sources of revenue just to pay off their old debts. It was like running on a treadmill, a strategy that required constant, exhausting forward motion just to stay upright. Section 4. Rotting from the inside, the real silver trap. Now, the massive debt was terrible, obviously, but the real trap was the devastating impact this illusion of wealth had on their domestic economy. Spain focused entirely on resource extraction. They just dug up silver and used it to buy everything they needed from abroad. Meanwhile, their eventual rivals took a totally different path. They focused on building actual financial architecture, things like institutionalized credit and domestic bond markets that could outlast any single shipment of treasure. Spain made a fatal error here. They mistook control of our physical resource for control over the financial system itself. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly logical human behavior becomes highly destructive on a national scale. Because Spain had easy money, they just bought everything from other countries. And as a result, their domestic industry completely withered and died. I mean, why would anyone go through the hard work to build a factory or plant a farm when you can just hand a foreign merchant a silver coin? It's the path of least resistance. So they just stopped making things at home entirely.
Section 5. The Modern Reserve Trap. History repeating itself today.
Now, if you're thinking, well, this is just ancient history, let this serve as a stark warning about our modern economies, because we are seeing the exact same pattern today. Modern nations with reserve currencies often assume that because they anchor the system right now, they're magically protected tomorrow. They rely on their privileged status to finance endless, massive deficits. They operate under this dangerous assumption that the inflow of global capital will just never, ever slow down. And exactly like 16th century Spain, they completely ignore the need for structural economic discipline. They are literally making the exact same leveraged mistakes. But history proves time and time again that the global system is absolutely ruthless at finding alternatives. When a single supplier, whether we're talking about silver centuries ago or a reserve currency today, becomes too expensive or too unreliable, the rest of the world will pivot, and they'll do it fast. Which brings us to the core thesis of our explainer today. Real financial power isn't about how much silver you have in the vault. It's about the architecture of the system you build around it. Spain had all the metal in the world, right? But they never mastered the credit markets or the discipline required to sustain true wealth. Wealth isn't just about the raw resources you pull out of the ground. It is entirely about the systems that sustain them. You know, the people who design global financial systems rarely build them with the intention of punishing themselves. But they often design systems that are far more fragile than they appear from the outside. Spain's massive global empire didn't collapse because it ran out of money. It collapsed because its leaders fundamentally misunderstood what wealth actually was. So I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. Take a look around at the global economy today. Which modern nations are currently falling into this exact same trap? Who is acting like 16th century Spain right now? Think about it. If this explainer gave you a new perspective on how infinite wealth can actually be a curse, please hit subscribe, because history really does hold the answers to understanding our modern world, and I'll keep showing you exactly where to look.